Yeah, so as Pastor Joel said, I'm Nico Desarro. I'm super, super blessed to be able to stand here with you guys today. Uh, it's just a miracle in itself that I'm being able to stand up here and just show what God's done in my life. It's just such a blessing, a big opportunity. Like they had said, I've known the crisis for a long time, pretty much, honestly, my entire life. Anne used to actually coach me in soccer. Um, I'm just a big soccer fan. She was really a big part of spearheading just the love of it. I played with her son Dylan and her daughter Maya and Red Lodge, Montana. And so I want to start with me, kind of background on my story and what God's done just since I was like really little. It was just a great childhood. You know, I grew up as in ministry. My mom and dad do horseback rides for kids that are in special organizations that are special needs or anything like that, and just really grew up with like just the heart of Jesus through them. So I've really just been able to experience just such a loving family and the heart of Jesus that was pouring out through them, and God really just gave me this heart for other people. In that time, I homeschooled, and with that being said, I played a lot of club soccer, and that's really how I personally got to know the crisis. And with that, just started to grow the love for soccer. It was a time in my life, and I remember this in my childhood, and I'll come back to this later, but for me, there's this time that I hit in my childhood that was really just this weird kind of feeling, and I was like, wow, like, life is just so perfect. Like, it's just so amazing, and I have a great family, and all this stuff. I have I'm one of seven siblings, and I'm adopted from Colombia, and a lot of my siblings are from Ethiopia and one from Montana, and just stuff just seems so good, and everybody was great. And I was thinking, like, how do I connect in our ministry to a kid that's been hurt, been abused, had all these situations, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, how do I connect? And for this little while in my life, I always just struggled with thinking like my testimony just wasn't it wasn't like conflicting. It wasn't like God just, like a crazy one that had like just all these sorts of ups and downs that I can connect with people. And so that was a little bit of a weird point in my childhood. It just seemed too good to be true. And as that kind of went on, I went to a ranch. Actually, this is the second time I've been out to this area. I went out to a ranch called JH Ranch. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It's an amazing ranch. It's very Christ-centered, a lot of opportunities. They do a lot of mother-daughter trips, a lot of just friends trips, and a lot of daddy-daughter trips as well. It's really cool to see what God does out here. And so I just kind of got sent to this area, and just an amazing ranch, and fell in love with Jesus, and that was a really big turning point for me. I learned just how to really just connect with God one-on-one, and really just connect with people as well. And it was just it's a huge turning point in my life, because I kind of was 1 foot in, 1 foot out of that testimony thing, and I realized that maybe I can just connect with a whole bunch of other people, and God was just doing so much. And I went off to South Dakota. South Dakota was where I met my grandparents. In my high school career, we were always very close. I went to go live with them and went to go play soccer there because it was just more competitive than Montana, and really just found this drive for soccer. A little bit of a glimpse was hopefully I can go D1. Hopefully that works out, right? Like everybody's dream is to play D1 soccer at that time, and it was just a great time of fellowship with them. And I remember this calling on my life that I felt, and JH Ranch was a big part of that. But there was this girl, and really where I just fell in love, and I just knew my calling was for people, was whenever I was helping my grandpa with something, and I saw this whole situation with this girl that we went out to eat, and I saw this situation with the girl, and she was limping, and it was at KFC one day. And I remember thinking to myself, like, God's pulling me to go pray for this person. Like, why am I supposed to go pray for this girl. And I honestly kind of disobeyed a little bit. I got back in the car, and then he pulled on me more and said, go pray for the person. It still happens to this day. I get so physically sick when I'm not doing what God's telling me to do. And I told myself, like, no, I'm not going to do it. And it got to me. And I got out of the car, went back inside, asked to meet her, and prayed for her. A week later, we come back, didn't know her name, didn't know anything, and just prayed for her. And then a week later, I come back, and she really just was like walking normal, but she was like staring at me like I was a ghost because she was walking completely normal. And I'd found out that next time that she was in an accident, and she had been limping for a week before I had prayed for her. So by God's grace, it healed, and then I knew that something in my life was really tied to the healing of others and to people. And with that being said, I want to continue on to just where I went to school. At that time, I was really just on like this burning fire for Jesus. I was really just like surrendered and looking forward to what he was going to do, and went to Oral Roberts University. I was very, very blessed to get a scholarship there for like a full tuition scholarship based off of leadership. Started a youth group in Red Lodge, been a part of that, and soccer, and all of these things were really just blessings from God, and knew I was supposed to go there. So I go there, and they had a D1 soccer team there. The soccer team was something that I had always dreamt about, and I realized that God, like, I really want to play soccer here, and it's pretty funny. I went to the two tryouts, and the second one, I don't think it could have gone worse. I woke up with late with an alarm. I had like a whole bunch of just things like technicalities that went wrong while I played. Honestly, I got back from it. I was crying on the phone with my mom, and I said, I think I forgot how to play soccer because it was so bad. And soccer at that point in my life had just been such a driving force for me. It had just been such a driving force of get to college, play D1, and, fingers crossed that whenever I got to ORU, not based on an athletic scholarship, but that I'd be able to walk on the team. And it just seemed to crumble. It was really heartbreaking in my life, but at that time, I surrendered it to God, and I realized God doesn't want me to play D1 soccer. And at that time, I realized my life is yours. I'm going to open my hands, and I'm going to just honor what you want to do with my life. And after that, life got pretty crazy. I hit this time in my life where I just kind of give up soccer. It was about a 3 to 4 week time where I was really just, fixed my eyes on him and what he wanted me to do. And from that point, I got to the point where my buddy actually asked me, he's like, hey, would you come with me to the semi-pro soccer tryout? And I was like, sure, like, why not? Like, I'm going to go for you. I'm not going to compete or anything, but I'll go for you. So I actually just rode with him there, grabbed my cleats. I hadn't worked out in like maybe 3 or 4 weeks. I was so upset with soccer. And just, tried out. And sure enough, God had a little bit of a turning point there. He allowed me to get on the team by one of probably the best weekends of soccer I had ever played, scoring a whole bunch of goals, and I was just shocked. And the coach before had told me that if I were to go play for this team, which he actually owned, at the coach at the school, then I would be able to come back and play D1 soccer for the school. But the tryouts went so bad that I thought it was over. So now here I am in this position where, wow, like this D1 mindset's back in my head. It's like I just got on this semi-pro team, so if I play for them and compete well, then I can come back and play D1. So soccer began to creep back into my head, and I had a very, very, very good season. I started on the bench, but slowly getting minutes. Ended the season playing 4 or 5 games, the full game length, and scored a couple goals and had a couple assists, and it went to be, a pretty good season. And it was at that time that I'm like, wow, like I'm hopefully going to go D1. I was really looking forward to it. And I feel like oftentimes God will sometimes give us so much so that we understand just how far we are from him. And in that position, it started to happen. Pride started to seep in my life. I went from kind of, and especially in Montana, this quieter, for me at least, like I was quiet. I kind of would say in the beginning I was kind of an extroverted introvert. And so I went from there to being super outgoing, and I gained all of this muscle, and I had all these friends, and I was friends with the basketball team and the soccer team at ORU, and it was really just kind of a prideful time in my life that I, at the end of it, didn't really recognize. And that's where things started to happen. That's where God hit me. So at that time, I had a girlfriend that wasn't the best, and I ended up breaking up with her, which was hard. And then actually coming back from that, I saw a car that was burning on the side of the road. I did not know that was my friend that I had played soccer with. He had passed away in the car accident, and that was hard, super hard time. And then a lot of friends stepped away from me because, honestly, to this day, I still don't understand why, but I do understand now, and I feel like that's the crazy part is God reveals that. But it was because He was soloing out all of these things in my life to get me to where my eyes were only fixed on Him, and the one thing I had left was soccer. And the pride continued to go, and it got to a time in my life where I didn't know what to do, so I hung out with my friend, and I went over to his house, and I was just sitting there, and we had drank a little bit at that time, and I was just kind of like in a broken season, and I go back to my dorm the next day, and I had this sharp pain in my side, and like I really honestly had never drank, so I was thinking like, oh my gosh, I have alcohol poisoning, right? Like I'm like, it's just a couple of, I didn't know what that was. I was freaking out, and then I rustle up the courage to call my mom. I'm like, I don't know this isn't good. Like this is really, really bad. Like I cannot move out of a certain position. I've called a doctor, like I don't know what to do. Maybe do I go to the ER? And I called my uncle, and he said, yeah, go to the ER. So I head on over to the ER. They're like, yeah, dude, like, sorry, man, you have appendicitis. And if you guys know anything about appendicitis, it does hurt, like, really bad. But it's also not debilitating because you can also get it fixed within 24 hours. Well, he sends me over to the hospital. I get admitted. My mom and dad are in Colombia doing missions work for our projects there. And they're there, and I'm talking to them, and there's a whole connection there about them trying to get back and everything. And I'm like, all right, I'll be fine. Well, the appendicitis actually had ruptured that night. So with that being said, I was just really in a state of confusion and things like that. I'm like, wow, like I literally just had signed my contract again for soccer, and I was in a position now where I'm in the hospital. I don't know what's going to happen, and it ruptured, and the doctor comes in, and he's like, the surgery went great, everything's good, we're just going to hold you for a little while. And that's when he came back in about a couple hours later, and he's like, realized that I had a fever and I was sick, and I was like, I just did not look good. And he's like, you're septic. He had cut things that he shouldn't have accidentally in my stomach, and I was bleeding internally. At that point, I just went down, in a nutshell, I went down this whole entire rabbit trail, which shouldn't have happened from the surgery, and got to the point where I just was so sick. And I had multiple different surgeries, but it just got to the point where I had 106-degree fevers. They didn't know if I was going to come out of certain procedures. I was completely septic at that time and was just losing muscle rapidly. So I went 175 pounds of just cut muscle for soccer all the way down to 136 pounds of just nothing. And this is me right here, just the whole entire situation beforehand at that time that I saw my contract. And with that being said, I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to move into more of my message now, and I'll come back to my story because there's just such an amazing turning point that God gave me, and all of this ignition from just what He's called me to do was there, but I couldn't see it at the time because I was so broken and bitter but he was working throughout it all. So with that being said, I want to move into my message today, and I want to go to 1 Peter 1, 6 through 7. And it says, "In all you do, greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes, even through the fire even though refined by fire, you may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed." Now, I've been kind of reading up on a little bit on gold on the way here. You know, it's kind of a fascinating subject, especially with California. And the other thing that also is affiliated with Montana, where I'm from, and California, is fire and the danger of fire. And whenever I was there on the plane, I was thinking about it a little bit, and I was thinking about how fire and gold kind of have a similarity in the fact that fire refines gold. And there's a lot of fires in our life, but every single piece of dirt, grime, slime, rock is melted off at gold at 1,947 degrees Fahrenheit. And only at that point that all of that stuff is destroyed, all of the impurities are out of it, can gold be pure, and it's purified, and then it can be molded into exactly what we use it for, whether it's a necklace, whatever it is. And the question during my presentation, or this message that I want you guys to understand and think on and dwell on, is, what have you ever faced in your life that's a fire? Because the things that we go through ultimately are sent by God so that they refine us and then mold us into the person he's called us to be. And that's something really big in my life that I've seen throughout my story, and something that has come into my life and my mindset whenever I think about people is that every single person has a fire in your life. And those fires some are just super hot and they're hard to get through, and God takes you to the lowest point, and some of them are simpler, and with all of that, they can either consume you or they can refine you. And you can see the fire as a furnace, especially like I did in the beginning of my testimony, or you can see them as a forge where you're molded and you're purified into what God's called you to be. And with that being said, at this point, I kind of hit a rock bottom a little bit. Not quite rock bottom yet, but rock bottom nonetheless. I got to the point where I was super sick. I'd almost died twice already from surgeries. I had multiple back-to-back. And whenever the doctor came in one day, he said, before that, actually, he came in and he said, "Look, I'm so sorry. You have a mass in your chest." And I snapped, because he did bring up the word cancer, and I snapped, and I was like crying, and my mom actually kicked the doctor out of the room because she was so upset that he had told me whenever I was just already so this sick and all of this stuff, and I was really just hurt. I just could not believe that there's no way I had cancer, right? Well, there's a very important part of that story that I'll come back to, but as that happened, that bitterness and that resentment and almost that anger towards God started to grow. I started to push my family away, my friends away. I wouldn't even look at a soccer ball. That was just not even, in my sight at all. I had gotten to the point where I was just so upset with God. Now, I didn't lose belief in him because I knew he was there, and that almost hurt worse. Just like a friend that you know is there, but they're not reaching out. That almost hurt worse. There's just such a turning point in my life there that went down to this anger and all of this stuff. And at that point, I knew that I just had to get through what I was going to get through, and all the pain, the meds, everything like that. I had abscesses that weren't going away. It just did not look good. But I decided to pack it up from college and go home with my family. So I packed it up, went home, and when I got back to my house, I started to slowly recover. really want to do anything with God at that point because I was just so upset, and my family was very, very, very consistent and loving in the way that they treated me, but I couldn't say the same. I was just super upset, and then it got to the point where we did have to deal with this mass that was in my chest because the doctor said that it did look big, and hopefully, fingers crossed, get a biopsy. It's not going to be cancerous. Take it out, and you're good. Well, at that time, I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna do it. I'm just gonna go get the biopsy. It's gonna be fine. I'm gonna take it out. I'm gonna just heal up from everything else. Well, I got in the biopsy, and at that time, I tried to really incorporate joy into my life, and some of that came with a little bit of dark humor and whatnot. And I said to myself, like, my mom called down from me before the appointment to go see if I had cancer or not, and she's like, "Do you need anything before we go?" And I was like, "Well, probably chemotherapy." And it was just like so bad, and that's where my mindset was. It was just so deprived. And then I got to the point where I was like, okay, this is real. My mom came down stairs and she's like, "No, this is real. Like, we're gonna go." I got there, sat me down. Doctor said I had cancer. My life just flashed. It was done. And I was like, wow. I'm like, the one thought that I had in my head was, I do not want to be here anymore. Like, I'm done. Like, I even talked to God in that moment. It was literally in the span of 2 seconds, and it's the longest 2 seconds of my entire life. And I said, I don't want to be here anymore. Like, I have no purpose. Like, soccer's over. Friends are gone. Kind of the least of my worries, but I didn't have the girlfriend anymore. My friend had just died. I am down muscle. I don't even look like myself anymore. And the doctor just told me I had cancer. And I said, I don't want to be here anymore. It was at that point that God just flooded into my heart. I've never had a peace like the one he gave me that day. I don't know how to explain it, but everything changed to just absolute peace. And with that came joy. And I went from pushing my siblings out of my room because I didn't want to be around happiness to inviting them in so we could play video games through the healing process. But it was just such an automatic, that's how automatic it was. It was crazy. And we got back in the car that day after I got diagnosed, and I told my mom and dad that I'm going to beat this better than, and this might have been the athlete inside me, but I told my mom and dad, I'm going to beat this better than anybody has before. I'm going to beat this faster than anybody has before. At that time, we didn't know what kind of cancer it was. We just knew that I had it. So for me, looking back now, it was like, wow, God's just that powerful. I don't even know how bad it was. And I told them that I'm sorry, but I don't want tears shed in front of me. If you guys are going to cry, please go do it in your bathroom away from me, because I will not let sadness and grief take over this part of my life. And it was at that point that I hit rock bottom. And with that being said, I really you don't really realize how good God is until you've been stripped of everything that's a distraction into the now moment that God has your 110% vision on him and him only. Now, with that being said, I saw my entire life just flip. God was beginning to put me through the fire and put me through this time of just complete reliance on him. And I got to the point where, that bitterness and anger was weeded out of my life, and I found what I truly had, a God who saved me, a God who was offering a hand to me in this fire. And yeah, I had been an entire Christian my whole life, but did I really know the power and consistency of God that was about to be shown to me? No doubt I didn't know. And with that being said, I think that the bedrock that we hit sometimes, that rock bottom, is absolutely what God just calls us to use. Because when you hit that rock bottom, it's really not rock bottom. It's actually just a foundation, a slab that we can just build ourselves upon. As time went on, I'll never forget the moment that I got diagnosed, because it just was that turning point in my life, and I had that peace and that amazing just joy feeling. And that's whenever I saw the fire as a forge, and a true forge, not just a furnace that I've been thrown into. That peace taught me right there that there's never a shortage of opportunities only a shortage of Jesus in our lives. And that's when I started to see my situation as an opportunity. Now, backtracking a little bit, when I was in the hospital, actually, with the CT scan that found that mass in my chest, I had gotten sat down next to a guy, and the guy had been in a wheelchair, and he's sitting there, and he's like looking across from me, and I'll never forget it. He's sitting there crying with a bandage over his leg, and he had no idea what was going to happen. He had no family or friends come and visit him for weeks in the hospital. The doctors didn't know what was wrong. All he knew that he was dying. And he's sitting across from me at the CT scan. I'm seeing this guy just weep and suffer. And I got back to the room, and I sat down, and I just broke, and I started crying. And my mom walked in, and she said, "Why are you crying?" And she said that, "I'm so sorry that you have to suffer." And that's whenever I told her that, like, I just met this guy, and, like, that's true suffering. Like, Jesus was still there, but that's true suffering. My heart broke for him, and that's whenever I felt the connection with him. And now in that downstairs room, right before I went back up, I had prayed for him, and he was just so accepting of the prayer. And it healed a little piece in me, too, because I knew that was a connection I could make with him. Now, moving back on to the healing stages and all of that, the next part of my life, like I said, I was just burning for Jesus at that point with the peace that he gave me. Going back into my message, when you walk through the furnaces of life, you can have peace by constantly reminding yourself that the condition is not your identity. It's just simply an instrument that God's using. And it's been given to you by God, so you can just see how powerful and miraculous he is, but more importantly, that other people can see that in your life. And maybe the fire is a forge, not just a furnace, in everyday life too. And with Daniel 3:21, and I'll stick with Daniel a lot in this message, but Daniel 3:21 through 25 says, "These men were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's order was so urgent that the furnace was so hot that the flames of their fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell into the fire bound, and the king's command was carried out, and the furnace was heated 7 times hotter than usual. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped with his feet in amazement and asked the advisors, 'Weren't there 3 men that were tied up and thrown into the fire?' And they replied, 'Certainly, your majesty.' He said, 'Look, I see 4 men walking around the fire, unbound, unharmed, and the 4th looks like the Son of God.'" Now, moving back into my message, that's whenever I started my chemo, is when I was thrown into the fire itself. I started chemo late because of the abscesses that were still in my stomach. It was brutal. I look back now and I don't know how God preserved me. I had started chemo and I had blood clots that were in my lungs that felt like just daggers that were piercing me from the inside, and I couldn't breathe. One night, the pain was so bad I could have sworn that I was gonna die there. The loss of taste and smell, and whenever you lose taste and smell in chemo, it's really hard to keep your weight up because nothing is appetizing. So you're not wanting food, and I was still 136 pounds, really just needing to up my protein intake and all of that stuff. And then I had to give myself shots throughout the entire thing, and I had nausea, and I was throwing up daily. And at the end of the regimen, got to the point where I couldn't believe it, because my doctor was from Mayo Clinic, and he told me, and he looked me in the eyes, and he's like, "I have never seen somebody have such a brutal chemo experience." And then he looked at me and he said that, "I've never seen anybody beat it as fast as you have." And this cancer that I had, it's a mediastinal yolk sac germ cell tumor. So everybody has cells that start down, go up to your chest, head back down, but mine got stuck in my chest and became cancerous, which makes it just the bigger miracle. It's about 1 in 2 million people get it, and they didn't really know how to treat it. So the fact that I beat this cancer that was aggressive and just so rare was outstanding to him. And I'll never forget that moment, because it's what I prayed for leaving the hospital the day of my diagnosis, is that I would beat it fast. And God just seems to work through it. Now, with that, through the fires in our lives, there's new things are going to happen. You'll become forged into a new person, but all while remaining unburned in the process with Jesus as your fourth man in your fire. Now, here's what I've come up with for my experiences with my life's most miserable moments. Fire resistance. And there's a way to walk through a fire and things like that. And I found that this acronym of FIRE really has helped me to get through it. The first one is faith. And we are called to stand firm in our faith even when we are fearful. Daniel 3:15 says, "Now when you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipe, and all kinds of other music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" I think that the faith is our foundation. It's that bedrock that I fell upon, that you find out that you can't rely on anything else but that. God is your foundation. He always will be. He's never going anywhere. He's consistent, and he's always going to be there, even when we push him away like I did. And moving on to it's integrity before God. And we're called to live our lives consistently in the will of God, no matter what the consequences. And we can see that with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and how they would not bow down to Nebuchadnezzar's image before the fire, and they were put into that fire because they had integrity connected to Jesus, and how they weren't willing to bend for the gospel and what they believed in. And at that time, verse 3, the R stands for reliance on the Lord and the Lord only. Daniel 3:25 says, "I see 4 men walking around the fire. The fourth looks like the Son of God." And I find that there's a lot of things that we can rely on our fire. You know, so some people that's drugs, that's alcohol. Some people that's people. Some people that's money. Some people that's even simple things like shopping. But God seemed to, in my life, and something that I've learned is that he's ripped all of that away so that our eyes are fixated on him and him only. And he wants to be the only source of reliance. The E stands for expectation. And we can accept the deliverance from the fire. And Daniel 3:17 says, "If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand." Now I want to move on to the outcome of that furnace. Now, for me, there's a big part of my story taking off from ending chemo. A couple days later, I started to run. I started to lift again because my vision didn't just shoot from, let's beat this, but I had a big surgery to get the tumor out, and I realized that I need to get faster, I need to get stronger, and I bought soccer cleats because I knew that I was just going to try to play again. Now, the specific chemo that I actually had I was warned about it whenever I got to pick the chemo that I did because I didn't know how or which one I wanted to do, and I picked one that had scarring lungs. It would scar your lungs. So that's something that was very dangerous for me as an athlete. And I was told by the doctors that chances are I'm probably never going to play soccer again. That had been a really big deal in my life, but God had carried me so far through. I'm like, going to buy cleats, and I'm like, no, I'm going to play again. And a couple days after I finished chemo, I was already back playing soccer. I was back at the field, yet like I was throwing up afterwards, but I was determined to play, and started to train again. Now, rolling forward, it was September. It's whenever I went in for my surgery, and this was a huge part of my life, is that I got to the surgery, and for some reason, I'd been through countless surgeries, countless procedures, and God he was there, but then I started to feel fearful, and it was the last surgery to get the tumor out, and it was a big one. It was a sternotomy. I just sat there and I said, I was in the waiting room, and I said, God, you've taken me this far. Just finish what you've done, and I'll carry it out from there. And I told him that if I ever get asked from this moment forward to share what you've done in my life, please make me available, and I will go, and I will listen. And at that time, I told him that I will go speak and share what you've done in my life if you heal me now. And it was the last thing that would have, technically I would have been in remission, but would have been cancer-free. And I go through the surgery, and it goes better than expected, and end up walking out of that. And my mom comes in, and she's like, I'm so sorry that you have suffered so much throughout this journey. And I was sitting there, big old scar down my chest, and had been opened up, and they had to go through my back and my side for extra stuff to get like lymph nodes out that could be cancerous in the future, and a whole bunch of stuff. And she came in, and I'm so sorry that you've been suffering. And I looked her in the eyes, and I'll never forget it because there's the peace of God again in my life. But I'm like, I haven't suffered. It almost makes me emotional to talk about it because I just hadn't suffered. Suffering is if I hadn't been adopted, if I was on the street back in Colombia with cancer, with no medication, with no surgical procedures being able to have done, with no chemotherapy, and all of this stuff is just a blessing in disguise. And I told her that I haven't suffered. And I'm very careful now to use that word because there is true suffering when people don't have the hope of Jesus. Because at the end of the day, everything that is on this earth is just here temporarily, but the eternity is found in that still small voice that we hear that brings us that peace in the midst of our fire. Now, verse 27 in Daniel 3 says that the strapists, the prefects, the governors, and the royal advisors crowned them. They saw the fire and had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair on their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. When we walk through a fire, especially in my life, I was able to walk through it with joy, with peace, and just this overwhelming presence of Jesus. But it goes farther than that because that's what people ended up seeing. People could see how broken I was in the beginning, but people started to realize that, and I started to see that I had an audience. I was getting random texts from across the nation about my cancer journey from what I'd posted on social media. I'd gotten a whole bunch of different prayers just from random people. So many people were praying, but it was because of what I was posting and what I was sharing, and I just remained very optimistic, very joyful. My sense of humor, I don't think had ever been as strong. With that being said, God was just working in so many ways, but it was through me at my most hurting time in my life to an audience that I didn't even know we had. And as we walk through our fire, you become stronger, but those around you become stronger because they're seeing how you deal with it. And it could be a simple thing as if you've been having a crummy day at work and you come home, but somebody's going to be able to see how you walk through that work day. Or for me, in my life, it was a bigger scale with cancer, but people are able to see that you can walk through this with joy. And that was my other prayer whenever I walked away from my diagnosis, is that God used this to teach other people about you. And I really just was really just praying, God, give me the joy to be able to walk through this better than anybody else has, because I want them to see that. And people did. And I just wanted to be a testimony to other people going through cancer, going through hard times, talking about how you can walk through it. You can be unburned and not smelling like the smoke of that fire. And our testimony is ultimately what other people see, and they're an opportunity. Like I said, there's numerous fires in our life, but there are opportunities to walk through that other people will see, and ultimately a time to connect afterwards. There's been numerous times that I've been able to connect with cancer patients at the hospital and things like that, and I was just overwhelmed because God's given me that as a platform to reach them. I'll never forget it. A little side thing, but I walked in the cancer center for the first time, and again, pride in my life had been at kind of a peak before everything. But I see this little girl, and it broke me. But she had no hair. I didn't even know that was soon to be me, but she walked towards me and she said, "Hey, how are you? Are you here?" And I'm like, "I'm about to start chemo." And I was like, "How was your session?" And she was like, "Oh, it was really good," and just walked off. And I'm like, she wouldn't have talked to me if I wasn't at that cancer center. And I realized that I was able to connect with her because we had the same story and the same hardship. And your story is going to be able to connect to another person through whatever you go through, even if it's financial and you walk through a hard situation, you trusted on God and you told them that, then they're able to trust Jesus, and then they're going to walk through, and then it's just a domino effect of what God does. And that can be seen through Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel 3:28, when Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who had been sent the angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command, and they were willing to give up their own lives rather than worship any god except for him." That's that integrity. And as I conclude, I want you to think about those future fires, your calling after the fire, and how we're called to live our lives. And Jesus is seen in the midst of whatever we go through. And with that being said, I always talk about in my life how there's a difference between praying like this and saying, "God bless this food, God protect my family, God give me the nerves to be able to get on the soccer field and play today." And then there's a difference in this. And this is where I came to in my life is, God, just use me how you want me to. God, I'm surrendering everything to you. God, I'm not my own. I can't do anything on my own. And kind of like the song we sang in worship is, you come to the end of yourself, and there's nothing else but Jesus. That's all you can do is rely on him. Now, I'd be lying to you if I said that your life wouldn't have fires. I'd be lying to you if I said sometimes you wouldn't get burned. And I know that so many of you guys have been burned in fires in your life, but Jesus and relying on him can get you through anything. In my life, I have seen that firsthand. I have 14 scars on my body. I had that laparotomy for the appendicitis, so there's about a line that just drops all the way down me. And I have had 15 surgeries. With that being said, 14 scars, 15 surgeries, and 9 which were major. 2 I almost died in. And I'm still standing up here talking to you guys today. And the testimony of God is just beyond what we can imagine. There's nothing he can't get you through. That he's going to refine you, and that fire is not going to allow you to be burned. And so lean on him in your times of need. I know a lot of you guys have had fires in your life. Maybe you're still in them. But remind yourself that it's temporary and necessary for those impurities and the worldly things to get burned away, so that that mold can start to happen in your life. And God can create you into what he calls you to be. Now, moving on to the life after cancer. I don't know if a big book in my life, even from a little kid, which is very ironic for me, but the book of Job, he just restores us, and he doesn't just take us to where we began, but he takes us farther, and he gives you back what you didn't have but in the beginning. For me, I really pushed to play soccer again. I really pushed for this time of just rebuilding. And like I said, I hit the gym immediately. After I had the tumor out, with 14 wires in my chest and a whole bunch of surgical clips in my stomach, I was like, I'm going to set out and play soccer again. And everybody's like, crazy, you're crazy. And I went to the field, and I was starting to play men's league and start build myself back up and started getting muscle again. And then sure enough, I get back to school and I go to the tryout because my contract had ended. Go to the tryout, and they said that we would love you to come back on and play. And it was at that moment that I'm like, God, you are so good, because you didn't just give me the platform, but you gave me what I love the most back. And now it's an instrument for him. And I couldn't have guessed that in the beginning, because going back to the beginning, it was so crazy. I was thinking about wow, I'm going to play D1 soccer. No, the purpose from soccer was not to play D1. It was just to show how good God was in my life. And it was just amazing to see that. And with that being said, I have I played last year, and it was the best season that I've had yet. I had around 6 goals and 5 assists, and really just a blessed time. I've been able to speak at a whole bunch of different churches and things like that. God has healed me so much. I'm back at the physical state of playing soccer and stuff like that. I'm still a little bit light, but I'm still working on that. But God's just given me such an amazing testimony that I'm loving to share with here, and this opportunity has been amazing, and God continues to do so much in my life. It's a pretty crazy journey, but He's with you through it all. And let those fires in your life refine you, because I'm telling you as my experience that they're not things that you can handle on your own. And God sometimes will take you to the breaking point just to prove to you not just that you need to rely, but just how powerful He is. Because standing up here today is the last thing that I probably could have ever imagined myself doing. But yeah, God gives you such an amazing opportunity through your fire. So with that, I know that there's a lot of people here, and there's a lot of fires going on and things like that in your life, and I want to be available to pray for you guys afterward. But with that being said, I have taken this testimony a little bit farther. I am now writing a book about my entire situation, and writing a book about my entire cancer journey, and just how we can find Jesus in the fire that we're putting, and how to react, and how to jump back on a horse and just chase Him afterwards while living a life that testifies. And I'm looking forward to get that coming out hopefully in about a year. I'm working on it. But if you guys want to connect with me that way or through other ways, these are my social medias. You can look for that. But I'm really just blessed to be here with you guys and share that, and really thankful for the crisis hosting me. But that's my message, and just know that fires are opportunities, and through the refining of them, that's ultimately how God builds us. So thank you.